Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Captain Patriotic. How's everybody doing today? I know it's been a little bit since the last time that we saw each other, but I just wanted to let you know that I am doing fine. And sorry that I haven't been posting more content lately. To be honest with you guys, I've been under the weather quite a bit lately. In fact, I just got over a case of double pneumonia as well as laryngitis. So if I don't exactly sound my best, I'm really sorry, y'all. I haven't exactly been feeling good lately. But anyway, if you had an opportunity to tune into my last episode, you'll see that we talked about the greatest and most decorated, I should say, one of the most decorated Navy veterans to serve during the Korean War, U.S. Navy Captain Thomas Hudner, where he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for rescuing his wingman and best friend, Jesse Brown, whenever he crashed his fighter plane into a mountain behind enemy lines. If you hadn't checked out that last video, you guys, I would highly recommend doing it, because that is honestly one of the bravest and most personal war stories of friendship that I've ever heard of in my life. It's a very inspirational story, so you gotta check it out. So today, I'm covering the last video in my most decorated veterans series for Korea, where today we're still sticking with the Department of the Navy, but I'm talking today about the most decorated U.S. combat Marine to serve on the front lines during the Korean War. This is just a shout out to all of our Marine veterans out there. Thank you so much for your service and sacrifice to this wonderful country. I don't know if hardly anybody could do what you guys do for us on a normal basis, for sure. And this particular video was hard to make because there was a bunch of names that I wanted to talk about. I mean, there are several out there. You guys probably saw my video from way back when about the most decorated U.S. Marine veteran of all time, and I almost did my video on him again. And that, my friends, happens to be Colonel Chosin Reservoir. Now, his decades-long career spanned time between World War I and World War II in something called the Banana Wars, as well as World War II and Korea. In fact, he is the most decorated U.S. Marine of all time, with 5 Navy Crosses to his name. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Navy Cross essentially is the second highest military award that any member of the U.S. Navy or the Marine Corps can be awarded for valor and bravery in combat, second only to the Medal of Honor. And this guy earned 5 of those between Korea, World War II, and the interwar period between the World Wars, as well as a U.S. Army Distinguished Service Cross. That is 6 service crosses in itself. One of the highest recorded number of military decorations for a service member of any service branch. So instead of going with him this time, though, I wanted to focus on another deserving individual that exemplified himself in combat, and he actually earned most of his military medals during Korea itself, even though he's a multi-war veteran himself. So guys, the most decorated U.S. Marine Corps veteran to serve in World War II happens to go to General Raymond G. Davis. Now, Davis is a very special individual and a very special Marine. He deserved all the honors that we're about to talk about here in a minute, and you know what? He's such a unique person in himself, for sure. he was actually very highly respected among his Marines and other officers in the Corps at the time. But anyway, let's go dive right on into his story and see what makes this man so unique, not only to the Corps, but to the U.S. military in general. Now, the protagonist of our story, Raymond G. Davis, was born on January 13th, 1915, in Fitzgerald, Georgia, where he grew up with a big family. He had so many brothers and sisters, it's like crazy, but he grew up just outside of Atlanta and had a really good childhood, to say the least. It was very memorable despite everything that was going on at the time, like the Great Depression. But nonetheless, Davis was a very talented student, and in 1933, he graduated from Atlanta Technical High School, where he would go on to attend college at Georgia Institute of Technology, where he graduated in 1938 with a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering. Whew, I don't know about that. That's way, way out of my element, you guys. I don't know how many brainiacs there are out there, but you know that was really hard to do. What you don't know is that during his college studies in Atlanta, he actually was a member of the local ROTC unit there at the college. It was an Army ROTC where he got a commission and everything. However, he talked to one of his buddies who had just enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps at that time. And after talking with a recruiter and everything, Davis ultimately decided to switch service branches from the Army to where he accepted an appointment in the Marine Corps as a second lieutenant officially on June 27th, 1938. You see, guys, this was well before World War II started. In fact, it was well over a year before hostilities started in general. But in the back of his mind, Davis knew that war was coming one way or another, and he wanted to be prepared for anything. That's why he decided to go ahead and enlist in the Marines to be prepared early. In fact, he didn't care who he fought against, the Germans or the Japanese. He just knew that he wanted to serve his country. He was a good old boy, to say the least. So, fast forward almost a year later, in May of 1939, and Second Lieutenant Davis completed the Marine Officers Basic School located at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and began a year of service with the Marine Detachment on board the USS Portland in the Pacific. He returned officially to shore duty in July of 1940 for weapons and artillery instruction at Quantico, Virginia, as well as Aberdeen, Maryland, where all the U.S. Navy and Marine units were. Now, upon completion of this training in February of 1941, he was then assigned to the 1st Anti-Aircraft Machine Gun Battery of the newly formed 1st Marine Division at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. He stayed there not too terribly long, maybe a couple of months or whatever, and eventually him and the rest of the 1st Marine Division returned to the United States in April, and in May of that year, he was actually appointed the battery executive officer, where he served in that particular capacity at Parris Island in New York, as well as in South Carolina, and again at Quantico, Virginia. Due to his meritorious service in this role, he was officially promoted to first lieutenant in August of 1941. A month later, he officially moved with the battery to the Marine Barracks at New River, North Carolina, which would later become known as Camp Lejeune. And after Pearl Harbor occurred in December of 1941 and the U.S. declares war on Japan, Davis knew that his time was about to come and he was more than ready to see some action. So after he gets promoted to captain in February of 1942, and his unit is definitely given the green light to be deployed to the Pacific, they go into more extensive training, like infantry training, like how to mentally prepare themselves to fight the Japanese on their own turf. Now, they officially got the green light and the okay to go out to the Pacific in June of 1942, where he would embark there with the rest of his unit. In fact, Ray's unit was one of the first to land at Guadalcanal in August of 1942. After he participated in that particular battle, he was appointed the executive officer of the 1st Specialist Weapons Battalion of the 1st Marine Division. And through a battlefield promotion and proving himself at Guadalcanal, he was ultimately promoted to major in late February of 1943. Now, it was in October of that same year where he took over command of the battalion and served in that high-level capacity during both the New Guinea and the Cape Gloucester campaigns of late 1943. As you can see in these first few battles during World War II, Davis distinguishes himself as a very capable and fine Marine, willing to do just about anything to get the objective done and to protect the men around him. So that's why he was given all this responsibility from the get-go, was because a lot of Marine officers really looked up to him and knew that he could do the job very well. In fact, his greatest moment for his early Marine career was just about to happen later on in 1944, and it was Davis's heroism while commanding the 1st Battalion of the 1st Marine Division during the Battle of Peleliu in September of 1944, where he would ultimately earn the Navy Cross as well as a Purple Heart for his actions during the battle. During the first hour of the initial Peleliu landings, he was wounded by Japanese machine gun fire whenever him and the rest of his Marines were landing on the beach. Now, even though he was wounded from all of the machine gun fire, he refused evacuation, and on one occasion, due to other heavy Marine casualties and point-blank Japanese artillery fire, the Japanese broke through. And it was here where he personally rallied and led his men in fighting to reestablish defensive positions against the hordes of Japanese soldiers. So, because of his bold actions, even though he was wounded, that to me was an honor that he much deserved early on in his career. I mean, the Navy Cross is a very, very big ordeal, you guys. Whenever he finally does return to the United States in November of 1944, Davis was assigned to Quantico, Virginia, as a tactical inspector of the Marine Corps schools, where he was named Chief of the Infantry Section, Marine Air Infantry School in Quantico in May of 1945, and served in that particular capacity for over 2 years, well after World War II ended. So for his service in World War II, Davis was already decently decorated and was a well-worn combat Marine at that time. And it was for his service in World War II that Davis was awarded the World War II Victory Medal, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, the Navy Cross, as well as a Purple Heart Medal for the injuries he sustained during the Battle of Peleliu. Now, for the next few years between World War II and Korea, he would go on to serve in multiple capacities within the Marine Corps. In fact, he stayed at Guadalcanal, Virginia at the Marine Corps School for a couple of years until July of 1947, where he would then eventually go back to one of the Marine bases in the Pacific, which was neutral at that time, where he stayed there until hostilities broke out officially in Korea on June 25th, 1950. Now, once Korea starts up again, he links back up with the 1st Marine Division stateside, and in August of 1950, that was whenever he and other Marines were called to active duty in South Korea because the situation was getting dire there, as you guys remember. Now, whenever Davis was in South Korea, he was officially put in command of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines from August until December of 1950. During this time, one of the Marines under his command described him as a man from Georgia and soft-spoken, no gruff, no bluff, never talked down to you, and made you feel comfortable in his presence. So that basically tells you that he was a very easygoing but fair commanding officer, and he had a lot of respect for the men that he served with, as well as for the men that served under him. It was in the beginning of December of 1950 where Davis would distinguish himself well above the call of duty, and this would be considered the highlight of his Marine career. It was during the 1st Marine Division's fight to break out from the Chosin Reservoir area in North Korea during the famous Battle of the Chosin Reservoir on December 1st, 1950, that Davis led his battalion of the 7th Marines in and through fierce firefights with the Chinese People's Volunteer Army from the little town of Udamni to Haegundae. Davis personally led in front of his men all of the way, marching his battalion at night over mountains in a severe snowstorm, where he personally led the rescue and the saving of Fox Company of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines from annihilation at a place called the Tongtung Pass on their way to Haegundae. Now, it was this particular action that also opened up the blocked mountain pass to Haegundae, which allowed both of the trapped Marine regiments to escape and link up with the rest of the elements of the 1st Marine Division there. Now, it was for his bold and courageous leadership under fierce weather conditions and enemy gunfire that he would personally be recommended for the Medal of Honor by his higher-up. Although the medal itself would take almost 2 years before it's completely fulfilled on his behalf. Now, other than his actions here at the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, Davis was decorated on several other occasions for acts of heroism and encouragement of his men during different stages of combat during Korea. Like, for instance, he was awarded not 1, but 2 Silver Star medals in a couple of battles leading up to the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, where he personally exposed himself to heavy enemy fire while leading and encouraging his men in the face of strong enemy opposition. Now, in addition to 2 Silver Star medals, which is the 3rd highest military decoration in the country for valor, he was also awarded a Legion of Merit with a Combat V device for his exceptionally meritorious conduct and professional skill in wielding the 1st Battalion of the 7th Marines in his leadership capacity from December of 1950 until June of 1951. He was also awarded a Bronze Star Medal with a Combat V device for his part in rebuilding the 7th Marine Regiment in South Korea after the Chosin Reservoir campaign. In fact, it was that same month where Davis officially returned to the United States and was officially assigned to the headquarters of the Marine Corps in Washington, D.C. A couple of months later, he learned that he was going to be awarded the Medal of Honor, or I should say there were talks about him being awarded the Medal of Honor, but he didn't know anything at the time. He just thought that he would get some other medal, like another Navy Cross. He did not expect to receive the Medal of Honor at all, honestly. He just kept on serving his country and doing his job or what have you. Well, in reality, that was in the works, because about a year and a half later, on November 24th, 1952, President Harry S. Truman presented General Davis with the Medal of Honor for his individual actions during the Battle of Chosin Reservoir during December of 1950, almost 2 years prior. You know that has to be a huge honor to meet the president and to be awarded this very, very prestigious honor for actions during the blistering winters and heavy gunfire around you. I know he was humbled to be awarded the Medal of Honor. That's huge, everybody. But anyway, Davis was very humbled to have the honor, but that didn't stop him from continuing to serve his country. In fact, after being presented with the medal, he continued to serve at the headquarters of the Marine Corps at the Pentagon until June of 1954, where then he would then be appointed to serve in the Operations subsection G3, Division of Plans and Policies. Now, the following July, he would go on to further his education in the Corps by attending the Special Weapons Employment course at the Fleet Training Center located in Norfolk, Virginia. Now, a couple months later, in September of 1955, he entered the senior course of the Marine Corps School at Guadalcanal, and upon completion of that course, he served consecutively as assistant director and later director of the senior school there at Guadalcanal. It was in October of 1957 where he was again transferred to D.C., where he served there as assistant G2 at the headquarters of the Marine Corps until August of 1959. In June of 1960, Davis completed a course at the National War College in Washington, D.C., and was then assigned to headquarters of the United States European Command in Paris, France, where he served there until June of 1963. Following his stint in Paris, his next assignment would be in the Far East, where he served as Assistant Division Commander of the 3rd Marine Division, Fleet Marine Force on Okinawa, Japan, from October 1963 until November of 1964. He was then summoned back to the headquarters of the Marine Corps, where he served as the Assistant Director of U.S. Marine Personnel until March of 1965, where he would then serve as Assistant Chief of Staff G1 until March of 1968. For his service in the later capacity, he would be awarded a 2nd Legion of Merit, and he would then officially be promoted to Major General. After the completion of this assignment in March of 1968, he would be sent off to South Vietnam, where he served until May of 1968 as the Deputy Commanding General of the Provisional Corps. He then became Commanding General of the whole 3rd Marine Division until April of 1969. Whenever he took command of that division, he ordered all Marine units in there to move out of their combat bases and to fully engage the enemy, because at that time morale was really low, especially for Vietnam, and he was basically making people get off their butt and do their job of why they went over there for. He had also noted that the manning of the bases and the defensive posture they had developed was contrary to their normal aggressive style of fighting for the rest of the Marines. As part of this change in tactics, he would order Operation Dewey Canyon in early 1969 to engage the People's Army of Vietnam in the Horseshoe Valley. Now, it was during this particular battle that his son, Miles Davis, who was a rifle company battalion commander in K Company, the 3rd Battalion of the 9th Marines, was wounded in action, but he was okay. He survived. Now, ultimately, for Ray Davis's service as commanding general of the 3rd Marine Division from May 1968 until April of 1969, he was awarded the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, and the South Vietnamese government awarded him several other decorations for his service, including 3 Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Crosses in his honor. Now, in May of 1969, Davis was assigned to duty as Deputy for Education, with additional duty as director of the Education Center of the Marine Corps Development and Education Command at Guadalcanal, Virginia. After he was officially promoted to Lieutenant General in July of 1970, he was reassigned to duty as Commanding General of the Marine Corps Development and Education Command. Shortly in early 1971, President Richard Nixon nominated Davis for an appointment to the grade of general and assignment to the position of Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps. His nomination was confirmed by the Senate, and he received his 4th star for general on March 12, 1971. It was there where he served as Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps until he officially retired from the military altogether on March 31st, 1972. Wow, guys, I gotta say, that is a very, very impressive career. Over 30 years in the Marines, that is like crazy. That's insanely awesome, you guys. No wonder he had a lot of combat experience and why a lot of people looked up to him. He was such a humble man, and I could honestly see why a lot of people loved him. So, just as a brief recap, for all of his military decorations and medals, in addition to being awarded the Medal of Honor for actions in Korea, General Davis was also awarded the Navy Cross, 2 Navy Distinguished Service Medals for service in Vietnam, 2 Silver Star Medals, 2 Legions of Merit, a Bronze Star with V device, a Purple Heart, a couple of Marine Combat Action Ribbons, as well as a handful of Navy and Marine Corps Presidential Unit citations, a couple of Navy Unit Commendation Medals, along with the World War II Victory Medal, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, the Korean Service Medal, the Vietnam Service Medal, and other campaign medals associated with his service in 3 wars. Guys, that speaks volumes to such a genuine man, and a selfless man for that matter. He really, really liked serving with his Marines, and a lot of people respected him for that. Even for years to come after his retirement from the military, everybody knew who he was, and he was very, very well respected among the community and in the military in general. Now, he lived a relatively quiet life after serving in the Marines. In fact, he moved back to his home state of Georgia, where he would live out the rest of his life for the next 31 years. Fast forward to September 3rd, 2003. Davis would ultimately succumb to a heart attack at the age of 88 in his home in Conyers, Georgia. Now, ironically, he did not choose to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery, where a lot of Medal of Honor recipients are ultimately interned. Instead, he wanted to stay in his home state of Georgia. In fact, he was buried at the Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens Cemetery in College Park, Georgia. His funeral detail and honor guard were personally commanded by then General Michael W. Hagee, who was the 33rd Commandant of the Marine Corps at that time. This is another great example of a living legend in the Marine Corps. He really did go well above and beyond the call of duty, not just in Korea, but World War II and Vietnam as well. I mean, he had a very impressive resume and record, to say the very least. And I know if I was a Marine fighting in Korea in late 1950, I would love to have had a commander like General Ray Davis. He sounded like he was there for his men. He was there to treat them with a lot of respect, but also watch out for their backs as much as he possibly can. I hope you found his story to be very inspirational, you guys. And happy holidays, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And please stick around for next time. Thank you, everybody.